What is going on, everybody? What is going on? The Catch fam, my name is John Dawson, and in today's video, we'll be breaking down 5 must-start wide receivers heading into week 11 of the 2023 fantasy football season. If you guys are new to the channel, this is all we do here all year round: free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys are into that, be sure to subscribe on the way in, but more importantly, get in the comments section down below anything that you guys need: start, sits, trades. The trade deadline is approaching very quickly here for most leagues, at least. But whatever you guys need, throw them in the comment section down below. I'll get back to you guys as soon as I possibly can. Without further ado, let's hop right into today's video. All right, first on the list, I'm going with Brandon Aiyuk of the San Francisco 49ers. Love this matchup going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here in week 11, who are allowing the third most fantasy points to the wide receiver position so far on the season. Since week 4 of the season, Brandon Aiyuk has only given you single digit fantasy points in full PPR one time, and that was against the Dallas Cowboys, where he missed the mark by 0.2, had 9.8 fantasy points. But I mean, I will say in the past couple of weeks, his ceiling has been a little bit lower, so I could see where some fantasy managers out there may not have as much confidence in him going into week 11. But overall, I expect this game to actually be a little bit more competitive than I think some people are realizing. I mean, this Niners defense, let's face it, they're for real, but this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense just finds a way to kind of stay in football games. And, they like to play from behind and throw the football a lot. And, this Niners secondary is still a little bit weak. So I think that Mike Evans and Chris Godwin will have some room to work in this game. Nonetheless, I just like Brandon Aiyuk a lot right now. Scored a touchdown in week 10, 55 receiving yards off of 3 receptions, 14.5 fantasy points, and the Niners basically blew out the Jaguars, so there wasn't really any reason to keep throwing the football towards the end of that game. But guys, Brandon Aiyuk, the wide receiver 15 so far on the season. This is a phenomenal matchup. It's been very good since he came back from that injury early in the season. Keep him in your starting lineups. He's a must-start wide receiver moving into week 11. All right, next up on the list, I'm going with Rashid Rice of the Kansas City Chiefs. In the last couple weeks, pretty low ceiling after giving you double digits from week 5 through week 7, 3 weeks in a row, 11 or more fantasy points. But in the last 2 weeks, 9.6 and 9.7 before hitting the bye week in week 10. But you look back to that game against Miami, scored a touchdown. The previous week against Denver, still had 56 receiving yards off of 4 receptions. And here in week 11, a rematch of last year's Super Bowl against the Philadelphia Eagles, who have one of the worst secondaries in the entire NFL, believe it or not. I know that front seven of the Eagles has been great throughout the season. They've been great at stopping the run. But guys, week after week, I've been telling you, continue to start wide receivers against the Philadelphia Eagles, and it has not disappointed. Rashid Rice has really been the only viable fantasy option in terms of wide receivers for the Kansas City Chiefs all season long. Love this matchup for him. I'm expecting points in this game. I'm expecting both offenses to go off in this game. I really like Rashid Rice going into this week. I know for a lot of you guys out there, he's maybe on your bench. He's a flex player. There's definitely enough wide receivers more than likely on your roster that you could start over him. But I definitely think Rashid Rice should be in your starting lineups, and I definitely think he's a must-start wide receiver moving into week 11. Next up on the list, I've got Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets going up against the Buffalo Bills this week. It's not a great matchup. It's not an awful matchup. But man, this Bills defense lately has looked quite a bit depleted. They've been dealing with injuries. They do come in 15th against the wide receiver position so far on the season, but I am in no way worried about this Buffalo Bills defense, even against Zach Wilson and the Jets. Now, this offense is awful. I get it. But they are consistently in a position where they have to play from behind and throw the football. And that is very good for Garrett Wilson, a player who early in the season, I encourage you guys not to trade, a player I encourage you guys to buy low, and a player I told you guys is skilled enough to make it through this season. Maybe not as a top 10 or top 5 wide receiver that he could have been with Aaron Rodgers, but as a consistent fantasy option throughout the season. And in full PPR, he's only given you double digits twice through the entire season. Every other game this year, 13 or more fantasy points. And you look, since week 4, Garrett Wilson has had 12 or more targets in every game except for week 5 against the Denver Broncos. I mean, he is getting a ridiculous amount of targets. He's coming up with a tremendous amount of receptions. He only has 2 touchdowns on the season, but it just does not matter. He's getting those PPR points week in and week out. Buffalo coming off of a really bad loss against the Broncos. I expect their offense to be as sharp as possible. I expect the Jets on the road to be in a position where they're playing from behind. And I expect Garrett Wilson to have another good fantasy game. He should be considered a wide receiver 2 this week, at worst a flex for your roster. He's still a must-start wide receiver as we approach week 11. All right, next up on the list, we've got Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos, a player throughout the draft process I really encourage you guys to go after. I mean, all offseason long, Courtland Sutton was my guy. Jerry Jeudy was not my guy. And what Courtland Sutton offers, the reason why I liked him going in this year, when you look at what he did in 2022, was just a consistent floor on a week-to-week basis. And now fast forward to this current season, 2023, he's given you a consistent floor every single week. I mean, only has given you a single-digit performance once the entire year. That was in week 5 against the Jets, who are the #1 team against opposing wide receivers in fantasy football. And listen to this, guys. He has scored a touchdown in every single game this year except for 2. Week 2 against Washington, kind of surprising. And then once again, week 5 against the Jets. He has 7 touchdowns on the season. He has a touchdown in 4 straight games, 17.3 fantasy points against Buffalo in week 10, 11 targets, 8 receptions, 53 receiving yards, and a very, very impressive touchdown catch. One of the best touchdown receptions on the entire season. This week, he gets the Minnesota Vikings, one of the worst secondaries in the league from a fantasy standpoint. They've been very, very poor against the wide receiver position, giving up the 6th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position on the season. This Broncos team at home, call me crazy, I think they're a little bit sneaky right now. Everyone doubts them, and I think they're just one of those teams that, even if they don't make the playoffs, they are going to do whatever they can on a week-to-week basis, as bad as they may look at times, to beat their opponents. I love this matchup against Minnesota Vikings for Courtland Sutton. He's been great all season long. He's a wide receiver 21 so far on the year. He's on pace for over 1,000 receiving yards, and he's on pace for double-digit touchdowns. He should remain in your starting lineups, no questions asked, as we approach week 11. All right, last but not least, let's talk about Tank Dell of the Houston Texans, who has shot up to wide receiver 16 so far on the season. He has only scored double-digit fantasy points 4 times this entire season. Every other game, he's at 8.3 or less fantasy points, and even missed week 6, and he's already had his bye week. So when you look at the ceiling that Tank Dell has brought at times, 20 points, 25.5 points, 29.6 points, and most recently in week 10, 18.9 points against the Cincinnati Bengals, where he had 14 targets, 6 receptions, 56 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Now, that was without Nico Collins, who could return in week 11 in this home game against the Arizona Cardinals. Am I worried about that? Not really, because in week 9, when Nico Collins was healthy, Tank Dell with 29.6 fantasy points, 114 receiving yards, 11 targets, 2 touchdowns. This week at home for this offense of the Houston Texans that is just slinging the football around, letting CJ Stroud, rookie of the year, more than likely, 2nd most passing yards in the entire league. Really phenomenal looking young quarterback, just sling the football around. Why would that change against the Arizona Cardinals, who are in the bottom 8 against the wide receiver position fantasy-wise so far on the season? It won't. Okay, Tank Dell's in a great spot this week, whether Nico Collins plays or not. And just remember, if Nico Collins plays, well, the opposing defenses have to consider him the wide receiver 1 and apply defensive pressure to him. That helps out Tank Dell, in my opinion. If Nico Collins doesn't play, we probably get a similar floor to last week, which was over 18 fantasy points in full PPR. Great matchup. This offense is going to throw a ton. Tank Dell should remain a very solid flex option, even a wide receiver 2 option at this point in the season. He should stay in your lineups. He's a must-start wide receiver as we approach week 11. That'll do it for today's video. If you guys did enjoy the content today or find it helpful, be sure to subscribe on the way out. This is all we do here all year round. Free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys are into that, be sure to subscribe on the way out. But most importantly, please get in the comment section down below. Whatever you guys need moving into week 11 of the fantasy season, let me know, and I'll get back to you guys as soon as I possibly can. With that, I will say, Thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.